Today's video follows a wingsuit jump by Sofia Alvarez, recorded from takeoff until the footage abruptly ends. The flight took place in a remote section of the Elk Mountains, far from roads, cell service, or immediate help. What happened during those final moments would only become clear after investigators pieced together the evidence left behind. It was August 17, 2019. The Elk Mountains rose across western Colorado in a series of jagged peaks and narrow ridgelines, their slopes covered in loose rock and alpine vegetation that thinned near the summits. The sky stretched clear and blue from horizon to horizon, unbroken by clouds. At roughly 11,000 feet above sea level, the air carried a dry chill despite the afternoon sun. Wind moved across the ridgeline in intermittent gusts, never strong enough to bend the sparse grasses that clung to cracks in the stone, but present enough to be felt against exposed skin. The terrain dropped away sharply on the north face, a near vertical descent that transitioned into a steep scree field before leveling out hundreds of feet below. Visibility extended for miles in every direction. The nearest trailhead sat more than 4 miles away, accessible only by a rough dirt road that required high clearance vehicles. No other hikers were visible on the surrounding peaks. The isolation was complete. The ridgeline sat in a section of public land that saw little traffic, even during peak summer months. The approach required local knowledge and a willingness to navigate unmarked terrain. Cell phone coverage was non-existent across most of the area. The nearest town sat more than 30 miles away by road. Sofia Alvarez was 29 years old. She worked independently as a freelance outdoor media creator, producing footage of adventure sports and remote landscapes for various clients and her own growing online presence. Her work required her to travel frequently, often alone, to locations that offered dramatic visuals and challenging conditions. She had built a reputation within her professional circle for being efficient and results-driven, but also demanding when it came to logistics. Those who had worked with her described her as impatient with delays and resistant to suggestions that added time or complexity to her shoots. She preferred tight schedules and narrow windows, often planning her trips around specific weather patterns or lighting conditions that might last only a few hours. Redundancy in planning was something she viewed as unnecessary. Extended setup times frustrated her. She valued output over caution and had little tolerance for what she considered excessive preparation. Her background in adventure sports went back several years. She had started with rock climbing and mountaineering before moving into skydiving, then base jumping, and eventually wingsuit flying. Each progression had come quickly. She logged jumps at a steady pace and sought out increasingly technical environments. Her approach to skill development mirrored her approach to work. She moved forward without lingering on intermediate stages. She documented much of her activity herself, using mounted cameras and editing the footage into short films that combined athletic performance with scenic backdrops. The work was physically demanding and required her to manage both the technical aspects of the jumps and the creative aspects of the filming. She handled both alone whenever possible. Friends and colleagues noted that Sofia rarely discussed close calls or mistakes. She posted successful footage and moved on to the next project. Her social media presence showed a steady stream of accomplishments, but little reflection on the learning process or the risks involved. Some in the base jumping community had privately expressed concern about her pace and her preference for solo operations, but no one had confronted her directly. That morning, Sofia had begun her hike before dawn. The trailhead sat at just under 9,000 feet, and the route to the ridgeline gained more than 2,000 feet over a distance of roughly 3 miles. The path was not maintained and required navigation through boulder fields and across loose talus. She carried a backpack containing her wingsuit, parachute, helmet, and camera equipment, along with water and minimal supplies. The total weight was close to 40 pounds. The ascent took several hours. She moved steadily, stopping only briefly to check her GPS and adjust her pack. The sun rose higher as she climbed, and the temperature increased, though it remained cool at elevation. By late morning, she had reached the ridgeline. The hike had been strenuous. The elevation gain, combined with the weight of her pack and the technical nature of the terrain, required sustained physical effort. Her legs burned from the climb, and her shoulders ached from the pack straps. She drank water and ate a protein bar while surveying the exit point, allowing herself a brief rest before beginning her gear preparation. The location she had chosen for the jump was a rocky outcrop that jutted out slightly from the main slope, offering a clean exit point with a direct line of sight down the north face. The drop was immediate and steep. Below the outcrop, the slope angled at roughly 60 degrees for the first 200 feet before transitioning into a scree field that continued downward for another 500 feet. The scree consisted of loose rock ranging in size from gravel to boulders several feet across. The terrain offered no flat areas and no vegetation large enough to provide any obstruction. Wingsuit pilots who had flown similar terrain described it as unforgiving, a place where small errors compound quickly. The rock face showed signs of recent rockfall. Fresh scars marked the slope where boulders had broken loose and tumbled down. The scree field below was active, its surface constantly shifting as gravity worked on the loose material. It was not a place where anyone would want to land. Earlier that morning, before beginning her hike, Sofia had contacted a private aircraft pilot she knew through previous work and asked whether he would be flying near the ridgeline that morning. The pilot was based at a small regional airport and offered scenic flights and occasional support for outdoor photographers. He had flown over the area shortly after sunrise, passing above the ridgeline at a safe altitude well above the peaks. His assessment, relayed to Sofia by phone, confirmed clear visibility and stable air at cruising altitude, offering little insight into wind behavior along the terrain-hugging flight path required for a wingsuit jump. The flyover lasted less than 10 minutes. It provided a general overview of conditions, but did not include any detailed assessment of wind patterns at terrain level or along the glide path that a wingsuit pilot would follow. The pilot had noted that conditions looked good from his perspective, but he had also mentioned that he could not speak to what a wingsuit pilot would experience closer to the terrain. When she reached the ridgeline, she spent several minutes surveying the exit point. She walked along the outcrop, checking the footing and looking down the slope to confirm her line. She noted the position of the sun and the quality of the light. The conditions appeared favorable. The wind at the ridgeline was light and variable. It shifted direction every few minutes, sometimes coming up the slope from below, sometimes moving along the ridgeline from the side. It was not strong enough to be concerning, but it was present. Sofia stood at the edge and felt the air moving against her face, trying to get a sense of the pattern. She set up her camera, a compact prosumer 360-degree action camera commonly used in base and wingsuit filming, and mounted it on a chest harness. The camera was designed to capture stabilized forward-facing footage and had been used on several previous jumps. She powered it on and confirmed that it was recording. She then began to prepare her gear. The wingsuit was a modern design, built for intermediate to advanced pilots. It featured fabric wings between the arms and body and between the legs, creating a large surface area that generated lift when moving through the air at speed. The suit was dark blue with gray accents, well worn but maintained. She had logged more than 50 wingsuit flights in it. The parachute system was a standard base rig, with a single main canopy and a pilot chute stored in a pouch at the bottom of the container. The deployment sequence required the jumper to reach back, extract the pilot chute, and throw it into the airstream. The pilot chute would then inflate and pull the bridle, which in turn would extract the main canopy from the container. Under normal conditions, the process took several seconds and required sufficient altitude to complete. The rig had been packed 3 days earlier by Sofia herself. She was current on her packing skills and had packed the same canopy dozens of times. The pack job had been done at her apartment in a clean space with good lighting. She had taken her time and followed the standard procedures she had learned during her training. Sofia checked her altimeter, a small electronic device that provided audible altitude warnings based on barometric pressure. She had replaced the battery earlier that morning at the trailhead. The device powered on without issue, and she zeroed the altimeter at the exit point, a reference that can become unreliable in steep terrain where ground clearance changes rapidly. However, she did not conduct a ground test to verify that the audible alarms were functioning correctly after the battery replacement. The test would have taken only a few minutes and would have required manually verifying that the audible warning tones activated correctly. She skipped this step. The altimeter was set to provide warnings at specific altitude thresholds. The settings were standard for wingsuit base jumping, with audible warnings intended as rough decision cues rather than guarantees of safe deployment in terrain-hugging flight. The device was designed to help pilots maintain altitude awareness during high-speed flight, when visual references could be difficult to judge accurately. As she suited up, she noticed a second potential exit point located roughly 30 yards upslope from where she stood. The higher point offered a cleaner launch with better clearance from the slope and a slightly longer glide path. Reaching it would have required additional climbing over loose rock and would have added at least 15 minutes to her timeline. She had already spent several hours hiking to reach the ridgeline after carrying 40 pounds of gear up more than 2,000 feet of elevation. The current exit point appeared adequate. She decided to proceed from the lower launch point. She finished her gear check, tightening the leg straps on her harness and adjusting the chest strap to ensure the camera was secure. She pulled on her helmet and gloves. She stood at the edge of the outcrop and looked down the slope one final time. The drop was clear. No obstacles were visible in her intended flight path. She paused briefly at the edge, then stepped off. No one witnessed the jump. The chest-mounted camera captured everything that followed. The initial exit was clean. Her body pitched forward as she left the rock, and within seconds, she had achieved a stable flying position. The wingsuit inflated as air filled the fabric wings, and she began to generate lift. Her forward speed increased rapidly. The slope dropped away beneath her, but the proximity remained close. She was flying a line that kept her within a few hundred feet of the terrain, a common approach in wingsuit base jumping that maximized the visual drama of the flight, but required constant precision. The first several seconds of the flight proceeded as expected. Her body position remained stable, with her arms extended and her legs together to maintain the shape of the suit. The camera recorded the view ahead, capturing the slope rushing past below and the open air beyond. The sound of the wind was constant, a low roar that filled her helmet. She made small adjustments to her body position, shifting her weight slightly to maintain her line and avoid drifting too close to the slope. The wingsuit responded smoothly to her inputs. The footage showed stable body position and consistent control inputs. Later analysis estimated her remaining height above the slope as the terrain began to level out and the scree field came into view below. Her altitude above the ground had decreased steadily since exit, a natural consequence of the steep slope and the glide ratio of the wingsuit. She was flying at a height of roughly 300 feet above the scree, with her forward speed still high. The camera captured the details of the slope rushing past. Individual rocks were visible. The texture of the scree was clear. The footage conveyed rapid forward motion as the terrain closed in. The footage conveyed both the beauty and the danger of the flight, the thin margin between control and catastrophe. The camera captured her right hand moving slightly, a small motion consistent with preparation for deployment. The hand returned to the wing, maintaining her flight position. Her altitude continued to decrease. The slope below was now less steep, transitioning from the near vertical face to the scree field that angled at roughly 40 degrees. She was still moving fast, her body cutting through the air in a smooth line. The scree field stretched out below her, a vast expanse of loose rock that offered no safe landing. The footage then showed her right hand, reaching back toward the pilot chute pouch at the base of her container. The motion was deliberate, but not rushed. Her hand found the pouch and gripped the pilot chute handle. This was the point at which deployment timing became decisive. Then, the motion paused. Her hand remained on the handle. The footage showed this hesitation clearly. It was brief, but in the context of a wingsuit flight at low altitude, it represented a loss of height. Her altitude above the scree had decreased to less than 200 feet, and her forward speed remained high. The footage showed a brief pause with her hand on the pilot chute handle. Post-incident analysis indicated that even a short delay at that altitude reduced the remaining margin for deployment. Whatever the cause, the effect was measurable. The ground continued to rise toward her while her hand remained on the handle. She pulled the pilot chute. Her hand extracted it from the pouch and threw it into the airstream behind her. The pilot chute inflated immediately, its small canopy catching the air and creating drag. The bridle began to tighten. The deployment process had started. The pilot chute pulled the bridle taut, and the bridle began to extract the main canopy from the container on her back. The canopy started to emerge, its fabric unfolding in the airstream. The ground was rising fast. The scree slope was now less than 100 feet below. The canopy continued to deploy, its cells beginning to inflate. The process was happening as designed, but the altitude remaining was marginal. Her feet struck the scree slope. The impact occurred feet first. With her body still angled forward from the flight position, the force drove her into the loose rock. Her lower legs absorbed the initial shock, but the momentum of her body continued forward and downward. She pitched forward onto the slope. Her pelvis struck the rocks. The impact compressed her lower spine as her torso folded forward. The main canopy, now partially inflated, collapsed onto the slope above her. Her body did not stop. The steep angle of the scree and the loose nature of the rock provided no friction to arrest her slide. She tumbled downslope, rolling over the uneven surface. Rocks shifted and moved beneath her, some dislodging and sliding alongside her. The camera continued to record, capturing fragmented images of rock and sky as her body tumbled down the slope. The footage was chaotic, the image spinning and jerking as the camera moved with her body. The sound was a mixture of impacts, sliding rock, and the rustle of fabric. She came to rest in a shallow depression where several larger boulders had created a natural catch point. Her body lay face down, partially on its side, with one arm extended and the other trapped beneath her torso. The parachute canopy was draped across the slope above her, its lines tangled in the rocks. The pilot chute had come to rest several feet upslope, still attached to the bridle. The camera remained mounted on her chest, its lens pointed toward the ground. The recording continued briefly, showing only the gray surface of a rock inches from the lens, before the device shut down. The ridgeline was remote, and the nearest maintained trail was miles away. Sofia had not informed anyone of her exact plans for the day. She carried a mobile phone in her pack, but the device had no signal at that elevation. No emergency locator beacon was present in her gear. The location where she came to rest was not visible from any road or commonly traveled route. The depression where she lay was sheltered by the surrounding boulders, making it difficult to spot even from the ridgeline above. The parachute fabric rippled and snapped in the wind, its bright colors still visible in the fading light. The figure below remained motionless. As darkness fell completely, the stars emerged overhead, brilliant and cold in the thin mountain air. Sofia had planned to return to her vehicle by evening. When she failed to check in with a contact by the following morning, concern began to grow. The contact, a fellow content creator who occasionally collaborated with her, knew that she had been planning a jump in the Elk Mountains, but did not have specific coordinates. He sent several text messages throughout the evening of August 17th, receiving no response. By morning on August 18th, he began calling her phone. The calls went straight to voicemail. He waited, uncertain whether her silence was due to lack of cell service or something more serious. He knew Sofia's habits. She often went off-grid for days at a time while working on projects. She was not always reliable about checking in, but something about this silence felt different. She had mentioned the jump specifically, had talked about the footage she hoped to capture. She had seemed excited about the project. By mid-morning, his concern had grown enough to take action. He contacted local authorities and reported that Sofia had not returned from a planned wingsuit jump in the Elk Mountains. He provided what information he had: the general area, the approximate timeline, and the fact that her vehicle should still be at a trailhead somewhere in the region. A deputy from the local sheriff's office drove to the area and began checking trailheads. Sofia's vehicle was located at the third location checked, parked alone on the rough dirt access road. The vehicle was locked, and there was no sign of Sofia. The deputy looked through the windows of the vehicle. He could see a duffel bag in the back seat and a water bottle in the cup holder. The vehicle appeared undisturbed. There was no note, no indication of where Sofia had gone or when she planned to return. A search and rescue team was mobilized. The team consisted of 6 volunteers, all experienced in mountain rescue operations. They arrived at the trailhead by early afternoon on August 18th, more than 24 hours after Sofia had begun her hike. Using information from the aircraft pilot who had conducted the flyover the previous morning, they were able to narrow the search area to a section of ridgeline roughly 2 miles long. The terrain was difficult, and the search would require several hours of hiking and careful observation. The team began their ascent, moving as quickly as the terrain allowed. They carried binoculars, radios, and medical equipment. The route was steep and loose, requiring careful foot placement and frequent use of hands for balance. They reached the ridgeline in the late afternoon. The sun was still well above the horizon, but shadows were beginning to lengthen. The team spread out along the ridgeline, using binoculars to scan the slopes below. The search was methodical. Each team member was assigned a sector to observe. They moved slowly along the ridgeline, stopping frequently to glass the slopes below with binoculars. The terrain was complex, with countless small depressions and boulder fields that could conceal a person. One of the searchers spotted something unusual on the north face, a patch of bright fabric visible against the gray and brown tones of the scree slope. He called the others over. Through binoculars, the fabric was clearly identifiable as a parachute canopy. The team began to descend toward the canopy, moving carefully across the loose rock. The slope was steep and unstable, requiring slow, deliberate movement. As they drew closer, they could see that the canopy was partially deployed and tangled in the rocks. Below the canopy, they spotted a figure lying among the boulders. The figure was not moving. The team continued their descent, calling out as they approached. There was no response. The descent took nearly 30 minutes. The slope was treacherous, and the team had to move carefully to avoid dislodging rocks that could injure those below. They called out repeatedly as they descended, hoping for some sign of life. They reached the figure in the early evening. It was Sofia. She lay face down in a shallow depression, her body positioned awkwardly among the rocks. The wingsuit was still on her body. The helmet remained on her head. The chest-mounted camera was still attached to her harness. The team leader approached and checked for vital signs. There was no pulse, no breathing, no response. The body was cold. The team leader stepped back and radioed the situation to the command post below. Sofia Alvarez was confirmed deceased at the scene. The official cause of death was blunt force trauma sustained during a low-altitude wingsuit deployment. A post-incident review found no evidence of equipment malfunction or external interference. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.